Many players struggle to find proper reference points to improve at StarCraft 2. They'll only judge their performance through their match history and MMR. But until you reach high GM, the matchmaking rating is made in such a way that you'll remain at approximately 50% win rate. So judging your performance through that prism will not only be quite frustrating, but I don't think it really tells the whole story. Today I want to share with you how benchmarks can help you better monitor your progress, make you more motivated, and help you improve much faster. What I call a benchmark is a reference point you can use to see how well you're doing in a precise scenario. For instance, if you're supposed to attack at 7 minutes with 100 supply, but you end up attacking at 7:30 with only 90 supply, you can clearly see what's lacking. You have an accurate reference point. When you have benchmarks, you know exactly what your aim is, so you're no longer playing randomly. You're no longer thinking, I think I should maybe attack now. No, instead, you know exactly what your target is, 7 minutes and 100 supply. Now, what's great is that whether you win or lose the game, you know exactly if you succeeded in achieving your benchmark or not, because you have actual numbers to back that off. Of course, some of you will say, well, hold on a minute. What if my opponent started with 12 pool instead of a normal hatch first opener? Doesn't that throw everything off? That's a perfectly legitimate question, and this also needs to be taken into account. But you can still use that metric for most of the standard games. And there's still a good chance you'll play several times against 12 pool anyway, so you can compare from game to game how well things are going. The two real advantages of benchmarks is that you have a clear goal to work toward, and then it's very easy to measure from game to game if you're able to get closer and closer to that goal. Also, it deviates your attention away from the outcome, winning or losing, to a precise task that needs to get done. It removes a lot of uncertainty in the game. No more wondering what your next move should be. It's very related to game plans, which is a topic I mentioned frequently. Now, what does it look like in practice? Well, most well-constructed build orders will have their own benchmarks, crucial scout timings, a precise time at which you're supposed to attack, like the example I just mentioned earlier, a certain amount of probes you want to attain, anything that's tangible and that gives you the possibility to measure properly whether you did a good job or not, and how far away from the goal you were. You can then identify how to fix the issue through replay analysis. Let's say you want to attack at 7 minutes with 100 supply, but you're 30 seconds late. Watch the supply blocks. Pay attention to the warp-in cycles, perhaps you missed one. Compare the original build with your game and check the timings of the key buildings, for example. Is your robo on time? Are the extra gateways on time? All these clues will really pinpoint what needs to be fixed so that next time you can avoid repeating the same mistake, enabling you to keep improving. I know it's tempting to queue again and again mindlessly, but it's important to take a moment to actually see what went wrong. How are you going to fix something if you're not even able to precisely describe what went wrong? It doesn't even need to take that long, to be honest. No need to dissect every single detail, of course. If you look at the big picture, you would have done 80% of the job already. Your future self will thank you. I'll show you a couple of examples of what benchmarks look like in-game, in several matchups. But before I do, I'd like to remind you that if you feel like you've hit a plateau, are struggling, or simply want to improve at the game, I'm offering coaching services that will help you get precisely that. The link is in the description. So I recently made a DT drop guide against Zerg, and this is a great example regarding benchmarks. I'm going to use this very replay because it's a fresh one to show you how benchmarks can be used. So the idea of a build order like this one is to hit as early as possible with your 4 DTs without sacrificing the economy. You want to have as many probes as possible while hitting as early as you can with a DT drop. Then players will optimize the strategies in a way that the build order will be as optimized as possible to actually achieve that. So in this very case, I'm going to speed up the beginning a little bit. My goal is to hit with 4 DTs in a prism at about 4:30. You can optimize it even more, you can hit a bit earlier, but I just want to take a reference point that most people can be able to achieve through great practice. So 4:30 is a good example. Let's see how many probes I've got. I think about 44, I would say. Yeah, 42. So basically a natural base that's almost saturated. So you can tell yourself, okay, my goal when I play this DT drop build is to hit at 4:30, I'm able to warp in 4 DTs while having 42 probes at home. And if I'm able to hit that benchmark, then it means I've done a good job, basically. As long as you're not cheating, right? You don't want to make a single unit and skip the scouting in the early game. Of course, you scout after the gate. You don't cheat. And if by playing properly and honestly, you're able to warp in 4 DTs at 430 with 42 probes, then it means you've nailed it. And maybe you can even improve that timing a little bit. The idea is not that you play perfectly necessarily, but as long as you get better and better, let's say one game you warp in at 445, the next game you warp in at 443. Well, that's 2 seconds earlier. You've done already a better job. And the closer and closer you get to that benchmark, the more you're improving. And you will see that your DT drop will subsequently deal more damage as a consequence of that, right? So that's pretty much part one of the strategy. Of course, if you have the APM for it, you use your prism as much as you can. But if you're a lower league player, I would strongly recommend you actually focus on the macro, because this is what actually gives you the most value. You know, killing a Roach Warren is cool and all, but in the end, it's much more important to actually queue your immortals and make some probes and queue your forge, etc., rather than just, I don't know, kill one building or one overlord or two. So focus on the macro first, obviously, and then you will be better able to hit your benchmarks, because if you spend half the game controlling a prism but you do not macro at home, well, obviously you will not be able to hit the proper benchmark, because you will, you know, be late on pretty much everything. So always macro first, prioritize building your immortals, upgrades, gateways. You know, for example, with this build, I'm making my gates a bit earlier than 6 minutes. For most people, I would say if you're able to make those 4 gateways at 6 minutes, that's not bad. You know, you have 8 gates in total, but most players will forget about these 4 extra gates. They will make them, man, I'm struggling to speak today. They will make them at 6:20, 6:30, and then they will wonder, oh shit, how come I have no units? That's the explanation. If your gates are delayed, even by 20 seconds, well, 20 seconds is 1 cycle of zealots. So you do the math, 4 gates, 8 supply. So you're down 8 supply if you forget your gates by 20 seconds. Or 16 supply if it's down by 40 seconds, right? So this is crucial to get your gates on time, way more than just controlling the prism. If you can do both, go ahead and do it, obviously. And the second goal in this game, the first one being, of course, warping the 4 DTs at 430. The second one will be to hit the 4th base at 720, 730 if I can, with 4 immortals and whatever gateway units I have at this time. So ideally you kept the 2 archons alive. 3 to 4 sentries, super helpful to force fields. You want at least 3 of them. And 4 immortals with +1 attack. That would be the second benchmark. So you can measure from game to game as you repeat this strategy. Okay, was I able to hit the warp in at the right time? Was I able to actually hit the 4th with +1 attack, 4 immortals, and a big bulk of units? Yes or no? And the closer you get to this timing attack and amount of units, the better you will get. But in order to do so, you need to focus first on macroing, spending your money, warping in units, and then finally with the remaining APM you've got, you can actually micro your units, control your prism, and so on. But if you focus too much on your prism and you struggle to do both things at once, your macro will suffer, and thus your timing attack as a consequence. So now we have a Terran opponent, and I mentioned earlier that benchmarks can often be timer related, in-game clock, but they can also be related to different things of the game. For example, where you're at compared to your opponent. Because of course, if the game starts standard, fine, you know, you can use the timer or supply as reference points. But what if the game is messy? What if the game is hectic? Well, it becomes very difficult to actually tell where you're at, because the timer and the supply will be completely off because of what happened in the early game. There are different benchmarks you can use. For example, in PvT, you want to be ahead in workers all the time because, well, they've got mules, and mules are pretty hardworking and they bring a lot of money in the bank. So you want to have more workers. How many? 3 to 4 per base. So basically, if you're on 2 base as a Protoss against a 2 base Terran, if you can have 6 to 8 more probes than they have SCVs, it means you're doing a pretty good job overall. And that's a very good reference point as well, because you can watch the replay and think, oh, actually I was up only 2 workers, which means I'm not in a good position at all. So you always want to aim at having more workers than your opponent. Check your replays. Are you making probes all the time? Very frequently people will skip chrono boosting probes, which is a big mistake. You want to chrono boost probes aggressively. Also in this replay I completely missed it. Another one could be, okay, whenever I have exactly 75 energy, I want to scout no matter what. Do not let your sentry have 100 energy before you actually send the hallucination. The moment you have 75, send a scout. It doesn't matter if you scout religiously later on, but the first one is the most important one. So if you play a Phoenix opener, like the guide I posted a few weeks ago, or if you play a sentry opener like this one, send your scout early and right away if you can, so you can actually see what's going on and react to it. So in this game, I will scout just a little bit. I just want to show you, see, 38 probes to 30 SCVs. I'm up 10, like 9 to 10 workers, which is exactly what you want to have. That's actually a pretty good position for me. If you're even on workers with a Terran player, you're losing. You're losing hard because they've got mules, right? So make sure you always have more workers, and by more I really mean 3 to 4 per base. So once you're on 3 bases, if you can have 12 more pros than they have SCVs, amazing. This is true especially for the early stages of the game. Later on, when you're on 5 bases, doesn't matter as much, you already have a big economy. But in the early stages of the game, you really want to aim at that. Another benchmark could be, well, if I'm playing a blink opener, I want to make sure I chrono boosted that blink so that by 4:45, whatever, the blink research is done. That's a goal you could tell yourself. I want my blink to be done at this time. I want to make sure I send my hallucination the moment the sentry's got 75 energy. And I want to make sure that no matter what, I always have 8 more probes than the Terran, as long as I'm on 2 bases, right? And you can then check your replays and see, did I do a good job or not, right? In this game, I'll go back a little bit. I took some damage to the Hellion drop. Not that much, to be fair. My defense was pretty clean, I think, overall. But you see here, I'm no longer up 9 probes like I was a few minutes ago because I lost 5. So I'm 41 to 38. But I know that if I stay like this, I will end up losing. I will get behind economically. What do? I then shift my chrono boost that I perhaps would have used on a robo or a +1 attack instead. I will just spend them on the economy instead, to recuperate the amount of probes that I lost, so that I can go back to being up 8 to 10 probes again, right? So I hit that reference point, if you will. Of course, you get used to it as you play, but if you're unsure, chrono boost your probes a little bit harder and see how it goes, right? So you can always be ahead. Here I'm even losing a couple probes to a Raven. Yeah, I think I lost quite a bit of probes in this game. See, I lost 9 probes, but I'm still up 10 probes because I know where I'm supposed to be at in the game. I know that my win condition is to at least outmine the Terran, so I focus fully on that. So even if I lost 10 probes, 9, I'm still up 10 probes, right? I will spend more chrono boost on the economy instead of the robo. I'm making a Colossus in this time, so obviously I want it on the field, and I have 12 more probes anyway, so I'm where I want to be anyway. So that's pretty much it. If you want to make sure you hit your benchmarks, what I would suggest, if you compare your games to professional players, because some of you will be fan of Max Pack, Showtime, and so on, watch their replay, check when their blink finishes, how many probes they've got, at what time they start the kill building. For example, if they play Colossus, when do they make the Robo Bay? When do they make the robotics facility? And compare to that with your own games and try to get as close as possible to it. It doesn't matter if you don't match it. They're professional players. Obviously, it's going to be very hard to emulate. Try to get closer and closer game by game. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope I covered the whole topic. Once again, if you want to get some coaching, you know where to find me. And I'll see you until next time.